State regulated, city regulated, and effective.
Chair, Malhi, or representative from SFPD or SFTPH, excuse me. Lieutenant Lang, or representative from SFD is here today. Stephen Kwong, or representative from BDMI. Matthew Chandler, or representative from SFPA. Representative from SFUSD. Dylan Rice, or representative from SF Entertainment Commission. And Victor Wong, or a representative from SF. So, today, board members, seat 8, Chairman Ali Jumalian. Seat 9, Vice Chairman Adam Davis. Seat 10. Excuse me now. Seat 10 today. Right opposites today. Seat 11, Apollo Wallace. Seat 12. Excuse me, Mr. Virgo. Oh, seat 10. Excuse me. It's unfilled. We're still looking at it. Seat 13. Sally. Seat 14. Shay Gilmore. Present. Seat 15 is unoccupied. And seat 16, Antoinette Moe. See Antoinette? Not today or not? So absent. Okay. That will.
Thank you.
The San Francisco Cannabis Oversight Committee recognizes that we are seated ancestral homeland of Ramaytush or San Francisco Peninsula. Indigenous stewards of this land and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush have never ceded, lost, or forgotten their responsibilities as the caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their original territory. As guests, we recognize that we wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors, elders, and relatives of the Ramaytush by affirming their sovereign rights as First Nations. Members of the public, I'd like to make public comments at this time, and if you're in person, please line up at this table. Members who are viewing remotely, there are two ways to make public comments. The first way is to enter your public comment in the chat. The chat box is open, and I will read your public comments as they come in. Otherwise, you may make a public comment by calling in at 1-415-655-0001. It's the access code 2496-126-9427, and then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue ahead of you. Please wait until you are unmuted. I see no one in person who would like to make a public comment at this time. I see no chats in this time either. Vice Chairman. For members of the public who are here in person who would like to make public comment, please line up around this table to do so at this time. For those of you attending remotely, there are two ways to make public comments. The first way is to enter a comment into the chat box, and I will read your comment aloud. The second way is to call 1-415-655-0001. Use the access code 2496-126-9427, and then press *3 to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. Please wait until you are unmuted to begin your public comment. Chairman, I see no individuals here in person who'd like to make public comment, and chats online. Thank you. Director Nikesh Patel is going to introduce.
It's good to see you. It is to talk about what we want space. So today the idea is to provide a presentation, state regulated space, the local regulated. My hope is this process state by a little bit. So that's Scott.
And I'm going to go ahead and move through state regulations, followed by the local regulations, and then also here to discuss today. In the interest of time, I will try to move relatively quickly through these slides and some regulations. It's really just to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what's required in this event, and also to ensure that I don't skip over anything that's critical in terms of planning these events. If anyone has any questions, I would ask them to hold them until the end of the presentation, unless it has to do with something that's on a slide that you specifically don't understand. And for any of our remote viewers, that these materials will be posted on our site for review. Diving right in. Starting off, first thing we want to chat about is the fact that there's going to be multiple steps that someone will have to take before they even really get into the meat of planning a temporary cannabis event. And those are three main steps, the third of which will involve a lot of specific event. So the first step is that to obtain what's called a cannabis event organizer license. This is a license that is issued by CCSF, the state licensing entity, and it's the first step in becoming someone who can host events, but it essentially gives you the ability to host multiple events. It won't be for this specific event, let's say, that you're planning, it will just be for the case of hosting any event in general. The second step is going to be that you're going to need to get in touch with your local jurisdiction, and you're going to need to get written approval from them for whatever location you're planning this event. So I'm sure people are relatively familiar with some of the cannabis events that we have in the city. So if somebody wants to host 420, let's say, in Park, they need to come to the city first and approve written authorization from us to host an event in and the actual text of it says that they need written approval from the local jurisdiction authorizing the applicant to engage in on-site cannabis sales to and on-site consumption by persons 21 years of age or older at the temporary cannabis event at the proposed location. The final step in terms of the licenses that are required just to plan and host the event itself is what's called a temporary cannabis event license. So this is another license that you apply for with the DCC. This is event specific. It's issued for anywhere from 1 to 4 consecutive days, and it must be applied for at least 60 days out. And this is the license that entails a long list of state regulations that we're going to be discussing in the following slides. So as I said, the event organizer license is just I want to organize any event in general. The temporary cannabis event license is I have a specific event that I'm planning, and here's the days, here's all the rest of the information that we're about to get to.
Scott, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, step 1, is that a local? Is that a license that you do from the state?
No, so the first step is from the state. First step here is you're going to get the cannabis event organizer license from the state. The second step will be the local jurisdictional approval. So that it's also it's also going to be other city departments. And then the third step is going back to the state and obtaining a temporary cannabis event license from them. And then there are also some as well. Make sure that you're hosting and where it's going to be hosted. And we'll cover a lot of this in so
That's right. And the local jurisdiction letter is also state.
yes, sorry. It is a requirement by the state that you get local jurisdiction approval, but you obviously also need to connect with
But this slide is basically the state.
This is essentially the state's procedure, yes. And then we're really about to dive into step number. Getting into the weeds here. We have a couple different categories of state regulations, and the first is going to be general event regulations. So all of this is going to be governed by the CC's medicinal and adult use commercial cannabis regulations, which is California Code of Regulations Title 19. And then specifically, we're going to be talking about Chapter 5, which covers cannabis events. So this section outlines kind of requirements for cannabis events specifically, but organizers are also expected to follow all these laws that in the interest of being comprehensive, we're going to review all of the applicable sections here, and then later in the presentation, we're going to drill in a bit more and focus on the regulations that typically present the largest barriers to entry to event organizers. And so there's going to be a lot of information relatively quickly. So in other words, we're going to cover the full breadth of the regulatory requirements, and then we'll drill into like specific. You can also just note right on this first slide that we're not going to be covering every single section of rules. You can see a C and an E, A, but we're covering the big ones that we feel like a lot of some issues with that take. So just talking about some of the general event regulations, as we mentioned, the cannabis events can only occur for anywhere from 1 day or up to 4 consecutive days, but no longer. There are location restrictions with events. I think the quote section is that they may only be held at a county fair event, a district agricultural association event, or another venue expressly approved by a local jurisdiction. So that's where that local jurisdiction comes in. There are alcohol and tobacco restrictions in place, and that the license cannot be issued for a premises that is licensed for the sale of alcohol. Will be required to have security presence at your event. So hired security, making sure that the cannabis storage location is safe, that IDs are being checked. So you're going to have to follow all the typical track and trace requirements that I'm sure all of our retailers are very familiar with. And they also require to get designated limited access areas. So as I mentioned, places where you're going to store cannabis might be an example of some designated limited access area. Another section of the state regulations is kind of the regulations around sale at the event. Noticed earlier that the sale and the consumption under a state permit are tied to each other. Basically, every event that the state is trying to issue a temporary cannabis event license for, they're expecting there to be sale and consumption. So those two things are paired together. And these are the sale or burdens of state sale regulations that folks run into. So the first is ID checks, very straightforward. Everyone needs to be over 21. You must have a designated retail section, so it's not just that you could be selling anywhere and have people walk around. There needs to be a specific area with booths set up in order to facilitate that metric tracking. There are restrictions on retail and other cannabis activities like cannabis transportation, and essentially the regulations here are that whoever is performing a specific cannabis activity at the temporary cannabis event needs to be licensed for that specific activity. So it's not just the case that if you own a storefront, you want to host an event, I can get this temporary cannabis event license and then I can just host the event. No, you contact the distributor because they're the ones who are going to have to from the event. If you were a cultivator, for example, and you wanted to host an event and you wanted there to be retail sales, you're going to have to partner with somebody who has a retail license because you need the specific license for each activity. So that goes for retail, that goes for distributors in particular. Secured storage is going to need to be on site. You're going to have a place that is considered a limited access area, and the cannabis can be kept for the entirety of the event. So for a multi-day event, that would be overnight. You're not going to be shipping the cannabis in and out every single day, and not stored on site in an access area. And then retail requirements. This is a big section, but essentially, as I mentioned before, anybody who runs a cannabis retail business, all of the requirements that are on the cannabis retail business are also going to apply. So as we mentioned, track and trace metric, specific amounts that you're allowed to sell, things like that. Then in terms of consumption regulations, there's three that are the biggest ones that we feel like we're run into a bit of difficulty with. First is public visibility, obscuring public visibility. So under these state regulations, it is required that your consumption area cannot be visible from any public place or from any non-age restricted place. So for example, if you're going to host an event in a public street, you have size to make sure that people walking by can't see. You also have to have head if there's neighboring residential buildings nearby that people maybe look down at the consumption of it. Parks or something above. There's also restrictions on alcohol and tobacco, so far as they're not allowed. There's no consumption of alcohol at these events. And local regulatory compliance. This is all just to say you're going to have to follow all the local rules. So our rules at cannabis, not just our rules. Health might have rules that you follow. Down the street, you might need San Francisco Fire Department, San Francisco Police Department, they might have things that you need to follow or something like that. So any of the local groups that have regulations that would affect any event, and then us as the Office of Cannabis in terms of these events, have follow those regulations as well. And that leads us right into so there's a quick note here at the top talking about the local regulations. A lot of the regulations are duplicative of state regulations. And the main reason for this is to ensure full compliance with all of the applicable rules. We want to make sure that if the state is going to require you to submit a parentheses diagram, say, hey, just to make sure you got that parentheses diagram. But in order for the simplicity of this presentation and to keep things moving along, we're not going to touch about the before you talk about state requirements. We're mostly going to talk about any local specific requirements, things that San Francisco puts in place on cannabis events that other jurisdictions may or may not. And we're also going to talk a little bit about regulations that are interpretations of state code. So maybe we go a little bit further, or maybe there's a little bit of nuance with the local regulation in terms of what we're asking for someone to submit. But really, it's just an interpretation of CC. So the first one to go into is how someone applies and the kind of general requirements that will be to someone who's trying to get one of these licenses. So, and for ease of information and understanding here, I provide some as well into what is just the local specific regulation and what is the state interpretations that we talked about. So the first thing is that an event organizer, these are the local regulations. An event organizer is going to need to submit certain information to the office 90 days in advance of their event. So this is mostly general information like points of contact, dates and time that you're trying to host the event, where it's going to be, that type of stuff, the types of activities that are going to take place at this event. And then we're also going to ask them some information about access to the event and equity, and we have certain provisions that ensure participation. So this has to do with maybe a certain number of retailers that you're going to need, and the size of your event. You might need to bring in certain equity retailers in order to these events and size as well. Those are some of the local regulations that we have in place. Some of the regulations that are state law interpretations have to do with security premises diagrams. So organizers are required to work with the Office of Cannabis and other relevant city departments in order to submit a premises diagram and a security plan for their event. That ties into the state regulation that we talked about requiring security at the event. And also this premises diagram that organizers need to submit has to meet certain requirements as well. There's also local regulations that are state law interpretations about tobacco. Just like with the state, tobacco is banned at all cannabis events. Locally, alcohol may be sold as long as the alcohol sales and consumption area are separate from the cannabis event. There's also a local regulation that the license to sell alcohol must be possessed by someone other than the organizers of the cannabis event itself. So if I'm going to host the cannabis event and I'm the one on the cannabis stuff, I'm going to be the one who hosts the cannabis event. And if I want there to also be alcohol sales at the event, like for example at outside lands, someone else is going to have that organizer, let's say, who's going to bring that license. And finally, there are also some state law interpretations, or finally for the slide, I should say, around enforcement, which is essentially just a provision that allows the Office of Cannabis and all the relevant city departments to come to the event beforehand, to check the venue, check the setup, to make sure that everything is in place. A couple of other state or local regulations to talk about are, we have a local provision that requires that licensed retailers come from San Francisco, the San Francisco cannabis community. And we also have a slight addition to the time restrictions on event, which is just that sales need to cease 1 hour. So we have a little bit of a down. These are the final sets of regulations to go through. We also have a couple, these have more to do with the consumption area and less to do with the sale or just general event conditions. So the first here is that these local regulations is that you need access to potable water. The second is that the consumption area also needs to have adequate facilities and facilities. And in terms of interpretations of state law regarding consumption regulations, we have a provision in our regulations that includes a buffer area that must be put around the consumption area in order to make sure that it limits public access. So this ties into where you need to fence it off for visibility. Make sure that smoke isn't coming in the wrong places or that it's right next to the event. That also has to do, it's right into the neighboring locations provisions. This really just has to do with making sure that the consumption area is not, say, like right next to a residential space, and smoke is just going to come right out of the consumption area and go into a building. So it can't be placed in any way that smoke can enter systems. And then the final state law interpretation in the local regulations is that organizers are required to submit what's called a pre-event plan and also to host a pre-event meeting. This has to include the Office of Cannabis, the San Francisco Department of Public Health, and also the San Francisco Fire Department. Depending on the type of the event, as we mentioned, the location, things like that, there are other things that might be. And under this pre-event plan, the organizers are also going to have to submit certain documents, but these are all documents that the state requires as well. So these are things like the diagram. One final thing I want to note here before passing it back to Director Patel to discuss the pilot is that there are other local regulations that are going to be in effect. These have to do with things like consumption restrictions, fire lanes, like we even here have to follow fire codes to make sure that our tables are set up properly, or securing other permits. Like we said, if you want to close a street or have the event in the park, those may require other permits. And you're going to have to connect with departments in order to secure these things. The Office of Cannabis obviously works very closely with our city partners on these, but you will be in communication with, like I said, like the department, the San Francisco Police Department, or San Francisco Fire Department, these things. So this presentation wasn't meant to be an exhaustive we just want to make sure everybody understands that there are state regulations, there are some local regulations, a lot of those local regulations are state regulations. And now let's it over to oh.
It's funny because Scott was exhausted and said this wasn't exhausted. So I'll try this presentation. Specific event has to meet issuing even though that requires to receive the signature and the sales for the assumption. That's this event. It's effectively reduced. That is set to expire. It's not state requirements. They are still state regulations. So the state requirements in Scottsville still state the ones that experience including I'll get state has set up. Specifically drilling back to the regulations, two state licenses especially it is just it's a brush state license. Step license. It is a couple thousand. It's on the sliding scale. So some of the Texas that kids safe space will be limited. Here's the big obscuring public business. Specifically, this relates to the consumption. Consumption market is the same for all three. It applies to the entire space. Why does it create so many still took probably 6 weeks, 2 meetings, and conversations. So that step in of itself is just finding with your process. Specifically, it's the advice and storage, space for distribution, not space. That's why space. So, street fair, farmers, as well. They have large enough quantity to provide 3 movements, as well as patient that is obscure in public. I was talking, but it's pretty big. It is a large space. This is just to say that these restrictions will still stay in space. Will still stay in. So, this process is cost, and we expect will be the case more cost. Big. Cost. Some will be on all. It's expensive to buy house. It's expensive. Security. It's not very cost effective. It's also very time intensive. I see that just based on the it's a minimum. That's when you start the process. See, 6 foot after 2 month mark. Stay. It's just assuming that you have everything part of 3 months out. Most vendors communicate, they reach out, trying to it's the knowledge. So it's a very long process. It's pretty simple at this point. It's just more convenient. So let this drill down. Considerations that say yes, there's a lot. That's not. We expect that there will be some applications, but there won't necessarily be a corresponding increase in the number of cannabis is that the significant processing demands of office of cannabis work without or if someone like described that's required to that's just not a very simple. Equally, this will be costly for the applicants. If they were coming to us, they would say, look, like let's look at the space there. It's not as simple. It's costly, but it's also it's going to be a strain from all of these. That's it's not. Want to make sure that this goes up. It's accessible opportunities. Now, so that is the concern. This process works out. So that's with that, we have some recommendations, and the recommendation extend the pipe. While it's been extended, the city can state discuss either possibly different size events, but to have that conversation, to say, look, this is what we, it's been about a year, sticking with that. And this program is a lot of money. So we want to have that conversation. That said, technically, also says, well, we think I criticize whether that application is actually to be clear, that I described cut down some of the time to identify. These might be city to security costs. It's not a solution, but that's why this all that requires.
I mean, I definitely think we should hear from the that are online, but I would like could you what are the indoor requirements, restrictions that we have for
So statements. Those same regulations would apply. So you have consumption area, you have to address other concerns. What is the most standard not speak to it, but
my counter argument, defending the power. Well, even if you get an on-site, you might get 5, 6 venues out of it. Well, but I understand you don't have the power. Well, I'm missing in the recommendation some sort of pathway for venue operating or because what we have right
Seeing since the event's going on.
now, either we could put the other those venues that are open, yeah, have a place for security. That's going to probably be good. I think that that's the community. Hey, why don't you try to get that? So I think recommendation pending the pilot, finding a few venues and giving operators to see if their venue fits the OFC, the state, and the city partner checklist. And would be sort of willing to invest in. But I do think we need to.
So, thank you, Chair Julian. I guess just kind of building on what Chair Julian was saying about, I think it's your third bullet point here on the last slide, but continuing to work with other state departments and stakeholders to identify possible locations for event permits. Is there any discussion or talk about having some kind of like event green zone? Like have like the universe of, I mean, I really feel strong agreement with the chair here. I think that, we're looking at a situation where we have, like you said, a very healthy, unlicensed event, situation here. And that's really not what we want. We want to, move those people into the light. And so I think it really is in how much work we're going to do, continue to work with our state department. Do we have any timelines for identifying number of locations, or do we have anything that we can think about our shoulder into that? Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, let's say there are two significant yeah, the second one is even if it's so say so if you also think same
I just think we could check this like we have for here's a primary check. If you keep these, then it's worth probably exploring further, just like we have. Problem that city partners that would be the most pivotal. Make up on yeah, the whole community as a whole. and it's third, not year one. So, that's good. Stay having that's something that expected that or stuff like that.
That's fun. So I think there's a start to say, everyone, fine conversation. Also, extend this time to share this. They say no, they may say yes. This conversation is happening simultaneously. Applications to make this a little bit more. So that there's a timeline for the state of it's typically so soccer view. That's why it's spent even more money. How steps to see if there's this change, this is processing. Say, what we put is trying to be
I think that's the benefit, not having people walk into a situation that's essentially not.
Do you have any example of what engagement with the state look like? Take
I don't think it's done that.
That's why we think it's all times that it's good.
I don't think the pilot program, all of that is going on. Imitate all the things that work for the pilot. How can we map one to 10? That's really what this is. This work. This is this venue has outdoor sale, whatever that. Couple of them. Map. Most sell them. They're never on the there, I think there's a lot of potential. See if their ownership is they can do good. The exercise.
Procedurally speaking, extending the pilot how that is legislatively continue to stand against the community. But sticking this is something very much about. That's what it is.
The pilot program extended with no venue with the pilot things would help on those that automatically be venues that another event could apply for. Those are the problem with and Zoom and that.
Shift from specific
That already
conversations that's the back. It's because so it happens to be the space that's most close to so whatever that's also why it's to identify
previous extension of the find a venue that fits the bill that all the requirements that it can still come online during the extension of the pilot.
legislator would say yes. It's part of the simplification of standards, which they be part of. Just because something we said one thing doesn't mean
Thank you. That's
Yeah, I just wanted to say to the listeners. So, to have temporary for space, plus space. One application. 12 days. And pay 1 fee. So there's flexibility there. Add it out. Also have it's cheaper. Spaces. Just wanted to temporary that permit.
One minor addition is that, I mean, this is a great forum for members of our committee, for city partners, for the public to comment about, especially our local work and like pilot program and things like that. But obviously, as we've already mentioned, Ali is on one of these state committees. There theoretically are pathways for communication with the DCC as well. They will host meetings about this. Those are things to kind of keep a bead on because, that's how they're going to let us directly hear your feedback. We can communicate with state regulators as well, but I think a lot more force is pushed when it's members of the community, it's event organizers, it's operators contacting the DCC as well and saying, hey, we see changes in X, Y, and Z in order to facilitate what we want.
public comment.
Yeah.
Do we have any public comment?
We do. My apologies for some of our remote viewers. I know I've seen some comments that we've been having a little bit of audio difficulty on the pickup, so apologies on that. We will look into solving that forward. But at this time, we will open it up for public comments. If there are members of the public here in person that would like to make public comment, please feel free to line up right here towards the back of the room to make your public comment. For members who are participating remotely, you have two options to make a public comment. The first option is to submit your public comment via chat box, and then I will read your public comment aloud. For anyone else, you are welcome to call in at 1-415-655-0001 and use the access code 2496-126-9427, and then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. Please wait until you are comment. Remind all of our participants that public comment is going to be capped at 8 minutes. So if you're catching off at a certain point, that is because your time limit has been reached in advance. I'm going to give folks a minute to potentially raise their hand, send a chat. As I know we have remote viewers, and if I'm not mistaken, one of them in the past. Yes, it looks like no one here in person, and it looks like we have one of our remote viewers who would like to make a public comment. Please begin your public comment when you are on.
Thumbs up. No. Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you, Ali. For so this is Nina Parks. I had a cannabis events license. I was able to do the first consumption garden and sales at a neighborhood street fair last year for Carnival of San Francisco. There are obviously a few concerns now that this pilot program is starting, which is expiring essentially, right? One of the things is that where are we going to be at next year, because there are some events such as Hippie Hill. I understand that you know, there is a need to identify some venues for potential extension, but with this pilot program going out, we still have to figure out how like Grasslands is going to execute, how Hippie Hill is going to execute. And then also, you know, as an event organizer, really one, it's very, it's not lucrative to be able to participate in events for anybody, really. More people are like out of the money that they spend, including the retailers, including the brands, the fact that it requires like 3 retailers, for like 2,000 person event, like for Carnival, like a bunch of our retailers were cannibalizing each other. We could have just used 2 rather than 3. And then also because we're limited to just the events in the pilot program that are pre-existing, we don't have the opportunity to operationalize our license in San Francisco. So we would have to go outside of San Francisco in order to operationalize that license. And then it doesn't bring in revenue to the city. We don't have the opportunity to bring, you know, things like the Emerald Cup or Hall of Flowers or any of the other, you know, potential revenue generators for the city, because we just don't have an option to. So obviously there's a lot of conversation that still has to go on about this pilot program and the extension of the ability to operationalize event licenses. And then, you know, thirdly, as a cannabis equity operator, according to what Nikesh has told me in the past, our businesses, for some reason, are not considered real businesses, meaning the event license is not considered a real business for the city, according to the city attorney. So we don't qualify for the state grants, which is odd, which is really odd. So we need a lot of conversation around this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your public comment. I'm going to provide another moment for any individuals online to provide their public comment in the chat box or to raise their hand to indicate that they would like to make a public comment verbally. And I am not seeing any more public comment at this time, Chair.
Okay, that concludes public comment, and can open the floor back up to discuss a recommendation or any other ideas or additions that you guys would like to add to the recommendation. I think Nikesh made a really good point. The point is to extend the pilot program, but to go back and obviously amend and make some changes to it. Once we have a little bit more data, sort of, let's call it a feasibility study of some venues, and see if they are feasible to hold events. I think making an outreach to the community that's already holding events is really important. Our city's policy has always been abate or come into compliance, so I think that's still a good proposition. I would like to, encourage everyone to reach out to the event organizers that you know, and, ask them if they think their venues would fit the bill, but we would need a checklist for that. So maybe if the OSC can work with, fire, health, entertainment, planning, and police, that way we could generate a checklist and really see if we can identify some venues. Because I do think, and Nina made a really good point as well, that there is, when the pilot program was made, I mean, even saying some of these venues were pre-existing cannabis events is a stretch. But at least we did that, so we would have 5 or 6. But I think now that this has become really a mature kind of underground scene, let's try to get them to come above water, and they will bring revenue to the city. They really will. So, point 3 is really the most important, I feel like, in the recommendation. So Shay, we want to start wordsmithing?
No, I agree with everything that Chair Jamilian said, and just extending real quick for the office, extending the pilot program for another 3 years. Is that right? Or not 1 or 2?
I think it's sort of a conversation for the committee. We think that having a longer runway is helpful in terms of being able to direct our energy on just finding the additional locations, working with city partners, not having to worry about going back to the board and saying, look, we need more time. So from that point of view, a longer runway is helpful, but I think implicit in that is also the recognition that hope is to go back and say, look, these are the additional locations we think that make sense. So.
And I think state regs, even 2 years is pretty optimistic.
Agreed.
Well,
State-
someone's gotta be optimistic.
I mean, again, I think the state is, a lot of counties and a lot of different stakeholders have been pushing the state. That's why they're obviously open to this conversation. But I think 3 years is a good duration to extend it. Again, we're always able to make recommendations or talk to the supervisors in the mayor's office about adding venues, especially if we keep that sort of language strong in our recommendation, and holding the city partners accountable to do this in sort of an expedient manner.
Well, I feel comfortable moving to approve the office's recommendation.
Well, I think we have to actually.
Yeah.
So, I think the motion would be to approve the extension of the pilot program. During that time, obviously engage state regulatory changes, continue to work with other city partners, stakeholders, identify possible locations for event permits. Specifically, I would add to that asking the city partners to identify a designated cannabis event point of contact for said permits. And creating a pathway for venue operators to engage with the city in order to find out if they would qualify to be a venue.
At the police and fire touch points.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Seems like that's the first point of yay or nay anyway. If you don't have the egress routes, if you don't have the necessary fires, suppression system, it's a no anyway. So you might as well check that first, because those are the most cost prohibitive as well.
And Chair Jamalian, I had heard you say something about a timeline, but I didn't hear it in the.
I mean, it would be nice to say that, a review of a venue should take no longer than 90 days. I mean, that would be kind of in line with your 90-day.
Yeah, I think, well, the timeline I was referring to was the extension of the pilot program.
For 3 years, yes.
3 years, okay. So is that a part of the motion as well?
Yes.
Okay, and then to your point about the 90 days. I mean, I think this is why time is really helpful, because we can figure out how long it's actually going to take. I suspect that it's not going to be equal for all venues, because there may be less opposition to a particular site and more opposition to another. So we can certainly take that down as a target, and then sort of report back to the committee of, here's how long it's taking in some instances. But I hear you.
So let's reword that motion.
So move for the extension of 3 years of the pilot program. During the 3 years, engaging with the state for regulatory changes, continuing to work with city departments, including by appointing designated representatives at the police and fire touch points. All with the goal of identifying more possible locations for event permits.
Yes, I second that motion.
Okay. And for a vote on, I guess we'll just say the motion for the recommendation that was just stated by Member Shea. Chairman Ali Jamalian, how do you vote?
Aye.
Vice Chairman Adam Hayes, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member Apollo Wallace, how do you vote?
Aye.
Member David Nogales Talley, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Member Shea Gilmore, how do you vote?
Aye.
Out of our 5 currently present members, that is 5 ayes, and we have 2 absent members.
Thank you. That concludes agenda item number 5, recommendations passed unanimously, scheduling next meeting and proposed future agenda items. I believe we did that in our last meeting. Not for this one, but for the next.
Oh. Yes.
So if there's anything anybody would like to add to the future agenda items, I think Adam, you have, was there fire?
Yeah, I'd like to add something to the agenda in regards to dealing with the fire department and CO2 permitting for cannabis cultivation operators, especially existing operators. I've personally been going through these steps at our cultivation facility, and we're pretty much done with all of that. Everything I needed to do. However, I found that it was extremely difficult to navigate and probably nearly impossible for a lot of people if they didn't have the right resources. And so I'd like to discuss something about, providing sort of guidelines or assistance, or, just having a person who knows how to navigate that process to help future applicants and cultivators.
To kind of put that in a little bit of perspective, cannabis growers are probably the only ones that just take CO2 and pump it into a room. The fire department of San Francisco has 0 experience with that. The only CO2 system they ever inspect is one that may, carbonate some soda or is in a closed loop environment. So what happens is that you get the runaround because there's literally nobody at fire that knows how to inspect that system. And this has slowed people down by 3 to 6 months, which is absolutely insane. There's engineers that do this for a living, that test these systems, that give you the pressure, how much CO2 is going through, how fast it evacuates, when the fire suppression system kicks in. And these engineers talk to our fire department and turn around to us who essentially commission them to do it. This guy has no idea what he's doing. He's never done this before. I had to explain it to him. That can't be the procedure. There's so much money on the line for these operators. I mean, especially cultivation, we're talking on the low end, 20,000 rent a month, on the very low end. Most of us are well above that. So when you wait 3 months, just because, and they don't want to deal with it because it's something that they never had to. So that, at that point, we do need to hold them accountable, and that has to be on the agenda. So it's a real problem for many operators. Some of these operators are fully licensed HVAC installers, and they know what they're doing, but the person that's supposed to sign them off, who does not know what they're doing, is like, nope, can't just have CO2 in the room. Yes, you can. It's just, so we really need to address the CO2 issue.
So just for clarity, are we requesting a presentation from fire, just like a Q&A?
Yeah, Q&A would be good. How do we pull this, how do you do this inspection? And an inspection guideline would be great.
Kind of Q&A revolving around CO2 usage in cultivation sites.
CO2 inspection.
CO2 inspections for cultivation
That's what it
sites.
really boils down to, yeah.
Okay.
And it's just I mean, it's a city problem. Other cities run CO2 in their fire departments. They're kind of dealing with it, so it's not like. Yeah, any other agenda items? We don't have anything that I would open.
Well, I wondered if this is something that, we could get involved in, and I just wanted to kind of make sure everyone is aware that, as of January 1 of 2024, the Medicinal Cannabis Patients' Right of Access Act is gonna come into effect in California. It will make unlawful all the prohibitions across the state in local jurisdictions that make it so you can't have access through delivery retailers. San Francisco doesn't have a problem. We're good with our regulations. We're totally in compliance with the act. But majority of the jurisdictions across the state prohibit and will fail the test for lawfulness as of January 1. And so I just want to know if like maybe we can put this on the agenda for like someone to come and kind of like get us together with like other jurisdictions that also have met the basic requirements of providing at least delivery retail for medicinal cannabis, right? And that's the bare minimum. And we're not even meeting that across the majority of the jurisdictions across California. So I just wanted to raise it and see if there's anything we can do about like banding together with other jurisdictions that are doing the right thing to kind of, I don't know, put out a public service announcement or get other jurisdictions to just comply with the law.
So maybe.
Yeah, I'm just gonna speak out loud for a second as we come up with a solution to this. I think one part of me is thinking, well, the reaction is yes. The second part of it is, what is the right time to engage? Because if the new year is when the law goes into effect, then does it make sense to see how certain jurisdictions come online with it before we engage? So that's one question that's sort of growing in my mind is when is the right time to do that, have that conversation? The second question is the form of it. Would it be inviting other jurisdictional partners to come and to explain, or just to provide an update on how they intend to be in compliance? Is there another sort of idea that you had in mind? I'm just sort of thinking, what does it look like when the time is right?
I hadn't really thought very much beyond just kind of raising it for discussion, but I'm definitely open to all those ideas and others, anything that can just, because I think if we don't get these other jurisdictions to comply with the law, they're gonna get sued. And those lawsuits are gonna be successful. And you're just gonna waste like taxpayer money, getting the regulators to do what they already know they should be doing to begin with. And so I think if we can I think San Francisco is a model jurisdiction for complying with state law. And if we can use our, position as a model for jurisdictions to, make improvements, I would love for us to do that.
Like
I think we can look into that for
Yeah,
one of the future meetings. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, we have maybe one left this year. The problem with that is generally it's a state and a local issue. So to butt into both of those, I don't think it'll be the efficacy that you're hoping for, but.
Right.
The state has the retail access grant thing going, so a lot of jurisdictions that want to come into compliance can also, draw from that grant. I think, agendizing an item like that kind of turns into like a feel-good agenda item because it won't really be impactful. Again, I think what you said, public comment at a state level
There's
meeting or
that.
at those local jurisdictions,
sure.
that probably has more impact, like mobilizing,
Yeah, just wheeling totally off the cuff would be like working with potentially other cannabis oversight committee equivalents in other jurisdictions to produce some type of a co-recommendation across the committees. I don't know exactly how that kind of coordination would look or what form that would take, but that's definitely something that we can discuss with leadership and with the committee and
Yeah,
try
we
to.
can make some intros and see if we.
Yeah.
More
It might be a
active.
little tough to get people here for the next meeting,
I
which is
agree.
theoretically next month.
Yeah.
Depending on the date.
And I think
but-
that agenda is gonna be pretty packed with whatever we
Yeah,
have to.
we do have the rest of the annual report next meeting as well, which I'm sure everyone's very excited about.
And really importantly, grant distribution recommendations as well. So
But I will make a note to
It's not urgent.
I think there's an outreach that can be
Yeah,
done for
yeah,
what
no,
you want to try and achieve,
Yeah.
you know? So with that, I would open up, public comment for agenda item number 6, please.
Sure thing, Chair. For members of the public who are here in person who'd like to make public comment, please line up over by this table if you'd like to provide your public comment in person. For individuals participating online, you have two options to provide public comment. The first option is to provide your public comment by chat through our WebEx portal, and I will read your public comment aloud. The second option is to dial 1-415-655-0001. Use the access code 24961269427, then press *3 when prompted to do so. You may be muted if there are others in the queue before you. Please wait until you're unmuted to make your public comment. I will provide a moment to see if any of the individuals participating online have raised their hand to indicate that they'd like to make a public comment. We do have one individual online with their hand raised. My timer ready. Please be reminded that the 3-minute mark will apply for this as well. I will remind you when there's 30 seconds left, and please feel free to begin your public comment when you are unmuted.
Hello again, it is Nina Parks. I just want to flag for you all that there is currently a recommendation from Supervisor Stefani to amend the planning code to change like basically like the discontinuance of people's retail licenses after an 18-month period if they're not up and running or like moving on to the next phase. They would like their position will basically be considered abandoned, and then they would have to reapply. Just remember that we are in a moratorium space, right? So we can't even apply for new retail for another like 4 years. I would suggest to really put a call out to other equity applicants or other businesses that it might truly affect, because I don't think people are following this recommendation from Stefani as closely as they should. Especially it wasn't brought up during this meeting as well. And it's hit for a 30-day mark of public comment right now in review. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Provide another moment for any individuals online who'd like to raise their hand to provide public comment at this time. I am not seeing any further public comment online, Chairman.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you all.
Finished 31 minutes early.